Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
For once, the clichés seem almost inadequate. It really was a political earthquake. We really are in uncharted waters, and we really do have no idea what happens next. So the search for clarity and maybe even some certainty is underway. And while it's a little previous to suggest that much dust has settled, a week has now passed since the referendum result was revealed. So we have at least had some time to consider its possible ramifications. Time now then, obviously, for a poll, examining where we were, where we are, and where we think we might be going with Brexit. It's thrown up a few surprises, and some rather bad news for anyone hoping that they'd seen the back of the ballot box for a while.
Have you had enough of voting yet? Apparently not. In fact, almost half of voters polled said Britain should hold another general election before the UK starts to negotiate Brexit, so that each party can set out its own vision for life outside the EU. And maybe this is why. 59% told us they were not confident in Britain's political leaders getting the best possible Brexit deal for Britain. That rises to 76% of Remain voters. And what about buyer's remorse? All those voters who supposedly want to change their minds? Well, maybe not. 92% of respondents said they'd definitely vote the same way, but of them, 5% of Leave voters did say they would now change their vote, compared to just 2% of Remain voters. And finally, imagine if all this just went away. Well, more than a third of voters think it might. 22% said they don't know if Britain will actually leave the EU, and 16% think the UK will actively defy the Brexit vote and find a way to stay in.
Of course, that's only part of the post-ref picture. The real action is unfolding at Westminster, where just about everything is up for grabs on both sides of the House. To provide a measure of the mayhem, no pun intended, you could probably argue tonight that the parliamentary party which didn't want a leadership battle is having one, while the parliamentary party that desperately does want a leadership battle isn't. Yet. Newsnight's political editor Nick Watt is filling his boots. Nick, you've found out about a plan to help ease Jeremy Corbyn out of the door.
Yes, well, all the signs from John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor today, was that Jeremy Corbyn was not going anywhere and he was going to stay. But I understand there was a delegation of Shadow Cabinet Ministers yesterday who tried and failed to meet Jeremy Corbyn to suggest a plan that could allow him to resign with dignity. They were talking, for example, that a commission could be set up over the summer and that would entrench some of his ideas about how you democratise the Labour Party, and it would also commit the party to push on with some of his core policies on inequality, and that if that could happen and if some of the leadership contenders could agree to that, then he would perhaps pre-announce his retirement and he would go after the Labour conference. Now, what is really interesting about this is that people like John McDonnell are very, very wary of this, because they are scared that the moment that he gives up the power, that's it for the left. But I understand that some members on the left who were in that room last year when his candidacy was approved, that they thought with great reluctance and sadness that this may be the wise thing to do, because they fear that the party could divide.
I hesitate to ask, but there's more bad news for the Labour leader tonight.
Yes, there's an interesting YouGov poll out of Unite members. That's the Unite Trade Union, whose General Secretary Len McCluskey is obviously one of Jeremy Corbyn's most ardent supporters. And this shows that 75% of Unite people who voted Labour in the general election last year believe that Jeremy Corbyn will not be Prime Minister. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if Jeremy Corbyn's opponents in the Labour Party pick up on this to challenge one of his central arguments. And that central argument is, I may not have any support at Westminster, but I do have support in the wider Labour movement. Important health warning: election data who commissioned this poll by YouGov admit that YouGov were not able to do the full weighting that you would normally expect, because they don't know the exact demographic breakdown of Unite members. But you know what, James? we shouldn't forget that there is actually a contest to choose the next Prime Minister of this country. So I thought what I would do is take a look at how that's going and also see how the front runner, Theresa May, is getting on. Who would have believed it? The plodder of the cabinet who eschews the intrigue of Westminster, political gossip and the party circuit is emerging as the surprise frontrunner in the Tory leadership contest.
She brings to her work a professionalism, dedication and hard work, a willingness to confront difficult problems, and that may be in great measure due to the fact that she's a woman, which probably is rather a positive at the present time, in my view, in terms of our national politics.
There's an unmistakable buzz around the Home Secretary, and her rivals are concerned. 36 hours ago, Boris Johnson appeared to be the slam-dunk candidate in the Tory leadership contest, after his former friend Michael Gove ended his lifetime's ambition to be Prime Minister. The question tonight is whether the Theresa May juggernaut is unstoppable. Like it or loathe it, Theresa May is now defining this leadership contest and even influencing wider government policy.
It's incredibly important we maintain fiscal credibility.
George Osborne indicated today that he would abandon his plan to achieve an overall budget surplus a day after the Home Secretary said she would do just that.
Michael Gove.
And at his campaign launch, Michael Gove had his sights set on Theresa May when he said that the next Prime Minister must be a Brexit supporter. But Gove knows he has to overcome the perception that he is guilty of a double act of treachery against two old friends, David Cameron and Boris Johnson.
As we sit here today, you have to conclude that, as it were, it looks as though he's gone over the Reichenbach Falls with Boris Johnson. It's taken him off, but done some damage to his own reputation as someone who previously had been a bit above the fray, but has now, gone down into the marketplace and has been swinging punches like the rest of them.
Fans of the Justice Secretary say he has the brains and personal touch to make it.
He's a powerhouse of a man, an intellectual that I've known for 30 years. I've watched grow and develop. He's a radical reformer, and he's a man who has always led his politics by conviction. He's the one who persuaded me to stand in politics, and he has the same vision for our country that I do, which is that we can really bring everyone together.
But momentum appears to be building up behind Andrea Leadsom, after the Energy Minister won the support of the former Tory leader Ian Duncan Smith. Perhaps Leadsom could become the main Brexit challenger to Theresa May.
Candidates with novelty tend to do well in leadership elections. No one had heard of John Major in 1990. William Hague was a relatively junior figure in 1997. Ian Duncan Smith had been a Maastricht rebel. So Andrea Leadsom could come, just could, from the outside to give Theresa May a bit of a run for her money.
With as many as 79 Tory MPs in the bag, some of Theresa May's supporters hope this contest could be sewn up at Westminster by next week. They are nervous that if the contest goes to the second stage, decided by grassroots Tory members, the Home Secretary's support for the Remain side in the referendum could count against her.
The main test for Theresa May is whether or not she can persuade Tory members that they should elect her when she was for Remain and when all the evidence is that a majority of them were for Leave. There's a form in Tory leadership contests being about Europe.
British politics is being refashioned right in front of our eyes, but even in the middle of a revolution, perhaps it will be the steadiest member of the crew who will guide us to the next stage.